There's a scene in Killers of the Flower Moon where Ernest Burkhart and Molly Burkhart, played by Leonardo DiCaprio and Lily Gladstone, are sitting at a dinner table. Not the picture that you're thinking of that has been advertised to us for years now. But in this specific scene, there's a thunderstorm happening outside, and Molly essentially commands Ernest to be still, be quiet, and respect how powerful this thing is. For this brief moment, you as the audience are just sitting in a theater watching these two characters respect how majestic this thing truly is. And I couldn't help but apply that to how it feels watching this film. I don't want this review to simply be commenting on other people's takes about this film, but it's impossible to not address how long it is, because that seems to be the main point of conversation that people want to talk about. But what I have grown to appreciate with Martin Scorsese is that he will not shy away from taking the time to get you invested and fully engulfed within this world. He makes some long films, but they are these works of art that are majestic in their own way, and it bothers me that for whatever reason, we can't help but complain about how long they are. This isn't going to be the most entertaining film of the year. It's not a feel-good story, something you're just gonna throw on TV when you're bored and want to watch a couple fun scenes. This is a work of art that requires your full attention, and I'll be honest, not everyone's gonna love it for that reason. So many scenes are designed to give you this experience, to get to know these characters, question their morality, and eventually build up this tension that ends with you reflecting on our own culture and how it relates to us today. You can't get that within 90 minutes. So I'm happy to say that this film was very effective for me. It worked in so many ways that I don't think could exist outside of this theatrical experience. But yes, I did go to the bathroom once, and I definitely heard dueling Taylor Swift songs coming from both sides of the hallway I was walking down. This film has been anticipated for many years now. This marks the 6th collaboration with Leonardo DiCaprio and Scorsese, and the 10th with Robert De Niro. That's a lot of miles between these dudes, and so to see them all working together on this project, it feels like a gift. But beyond those two leads, every single person within this cast holds their own. Lily Gladstone specifically, I think, is the star of this film. She's really the heart and soul and the only sense of morality that you want to cling on to. Within this film, she plays a character whose family is being brutally murdered, dying from illness, and a large theme of this film is her trying to sort out what the truth is and who she can actually trust. If you're unaware of the plot of this film, it follows the Osage Nation, a group of Native Americans that have been displaced, but the new land that they have found has oil on it, and they become very wealthy. And surprise, surprise, white people try to mess it up. There's been a lot of conversation about how authentic this is, especially being directed by a white male. And I think that conversation is relevant when looking at the perspective of how this story is told. Unfortunately, I do think Molly Burkhart kind of takes a back seat for a lot of this film, and I would be very interested in seeing a version that more centers around her perspective. But at the same time, I sort of understand why Ernest Burkhart kind of needs to be the protagonist, and I think a lot of it is more due to Martin Scorsese's strengths. And I think Lily Gladstone said it best when, yes, this might not be the most authentic story about the Osage people, but nobody is giving this kind of money for them to make their own film. And so I do hope that by Martin Scorsese telling this story, it leads to more stories being told from their full perspective. And honestly, I know very little about this topic, so I have spent some time researching and seeing other opinions, and I would encourage you to do the same thing. But from what I can tell, a lot of them are pleased with how these people are portrayed in this film. And I was thrilled to hear that, because from my experience, learning a lot of this and seeing a lot of these customs and cultures for the first time on the screen, it was a really enriching experience that I do think was made better due to how much time I spent with them, due to how much time I got to spend in the theater with them. There's so many beautiful costumes and settings and visuals that match the theme of what the Osage people believe, and I think the balance worked quite well, taking a lot of time to serve the people of the Osage Nation, while also turning into a Martin Scorsese film filled with crime, murder, and an investigation that ends in a courtroom. This is where people like Jesse Plemons, Brendon Fraser, John Lithgow all show up, and in my opinion, they all do a phenomenal job. In the end, it all comes together really fleshed out as a story, with a fairly effective emotional framing device at the end that I don't necessarily want to spoil in this video, but it proves that Martin Scorsese still has a lot to offer when it comes to filmmaking. In many ways, there's a lot of cool imagery and styles that he chooses to do with his filmmaking. There's this opening shot where we see Ernest Burkhart get off a train and enter into this town for the first time in a long time. And there's this overhead camera that's kind of tracking him. It feels like this long, continuous take, and it reminds me a lot of Scorsese films like Casino or Goodfellas, where we're getting a real good gauge of this environment, and there are times where it feels so familiar that you almost think you know where this is going to go. But then there are a lot of times where it switches up on you, and it almost does feel like Scorsese is commenting on the way that he has made films before, where this one is a lot more slow and well-paced and dedicated to the emotions of these people. And the emotions they often show aren't as big and flashy and yelling like we've seen with a lot of his films. But Lily Gladstone, for example, and I know I just keep hyping her up at this point, she says so much with just her eyes and the way she stares at a character. You can see her demeanor begin to change as she changes as a person and has new revelations about her life and so many others. A critique that Martin Scorsese movies occasionally get is that sometimes it does feel like he's celebrating the bad guys. The Wolf of Wall Street, Goodfellas, Taxi Driver. These are all films with a problematic protagonist, and I don't think the films celebrate them at all. But I think if you have a very shallow reading of them, you might walk out thinking that he's co-signing this behavior. And I think Killers of the Flower Moon does a very good job of staying away from even that sort of nuance. And there are plenty of films where moral ambiguity can be a benefit, but I do find it important that this is a film where he makes it very clear that these actions are evil. At best, there are times within this film where you're trying to decipher how much these characters actually know. We are well aware they're complicit, but sometimes it's hard to tell if it's due to their own ignorance or if they are actually evil. So rather than showing you up front, the movie kind of takes time to develop your relationship with them. And when it does eventually reveal how complicit they are with the situation, you find very little empathy for them, and I find that very powerful coming from one of his films. I also got to shout out his editor, Thelma Schoonmaker. She has edited his films for over 5 decades at this point, and having spent the last few months watching 15 of his films now, I really admire that she's still in the game and honestly one of the best editors in Hollywood. This film is in theaters now and will be on Apple TV Plus soon, but if you want my recommendation, I would carve out the time and go see this in a theater if you have the opportunity. Apple TV Plus, you're gonna be real tempted to watch this in increments, and I just don't think that this would have the same effect if you choose to do it. And I just don't think that would have the same effect if you choose to do it that way. But I understand everyone's busy. 3.5 hours is a lot of time to commit. So either way, please consider going to support this film. Martin Scorsese only has a few films left in him, so please just cherish it while it's here. That's Killers of the Flower Moon. Have you seen it? What do you think? Comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and I will see you next time.